Hey, it's great to be here this morning, Saturday morning. Usually that's a time where you have to yourself, but today I'm really excited to present something that has always been part of my life. It's the culture of the American Indian. And I was asked to present a side of the culture of American Indians, specifically my perspective of what I see. Just a little bit of introduction. I'm going to start in English and then I'm going to switch over to Navajo. And that's I guess, a greeting that I'll do. And that's a cultural thing. It's a belief system, a value system, a tradition that has been given to us from our, in this case, from my father, my grandfather, and his father. That anytime that you have an audience and you're presenting or you're talking with a group of people, you'll always go into your greeting of being who you are. In this case, being a Navajo. So let me uh, let me go to the next page here. This is a Navajo greeting. It's what we say to each other is Yate. And I'm going to switch over to Navajo now and just to talk a little bit about my introduction. Dide Hanso Kagi Sibahansen. She kia ani slido tseslani basis chin. Hanagani shinalat kapan she check without the nen slon. And lay out so that other she's chin. Kade lay Utah State Board of Education, American Indian Education Specialist, Dalye Ede Ebanashnish. The Hanso Kaga Ase Bahans and Slo and Tsago. This is a Navajo greeting that we'll always oftentimes offer. And what I said in Navajo was that I'm very appreciative of being here this morning with you audience. I'm from the Towering House Clan of the Navajo. I was born for my father's side, which is the Tseslani, which is the Corner Cove people. And my maternal is Hanagani, which is the Walk Around clan. And my grandfather's side is Tache. Tache, that's my grandfather's clan. So I belong to the four clans, and then I just indicated that I'm glad to be here, and we'll cross paths somewhere along the line, and this is the time. And so that's basically my introduction here. And the next is this another greeting that we have. It's a morning greeting that we often say to each other. On the reservation, this is what we use as a greeting when we see each other in the morning. It's Yat bin. It's a greeting. It's meaning good morning. These are some of the um, ways in which we believe in my tradition, my value, and my belief system is in the line of Navajo. Just a little bit about my background. I was born and raised on the Navajo reservation, and I got off the reservation because I had a talent. The talent that I had was I could run. I could run long distances at a certain speed, and I guess the colleges out there, they recognized that. So I took that opportunity. I left the reservation and attended a junior college, Central Arizona College in uh, Central Arizona at Casa Grande. And I graduated from there, and I went on to the University of Arizona. That's where I received my baccalaureate degree in social studies, and my minor was in special education. Um, and I've been at the I taught at the high school for about the 15 years. As they say that when I graduated from the University of Arizona, my wife and I decided to move back to the reservation. That's where I did all my teaching, and I did all my experiences of teaching at the high school. I've also been a track and field coach and cross country coach at the high school. because of my background, and that's what took me off the reservation. And for good reasons, I returned back to the reservation, and I'm glad of that. And a few years after the 16th year, I decided to get into administration, and I've been in administration for the next 16 years, both at the high school and the middle school. So I'm kind of recovering from recovering from being at the junior high. I really love those kids. So that was for me, that was a lot of fun. And today I work as well. I'm employed and I serve as the American Indian Education Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. That gives me an opportunity to see um, the programs that are for Title VI program, which is American Indian Education. And I have the opportunity to go visit these sites and to hopefully, have an impact on the progress of educating the American Indian Alaska Native student. Because oftentimes that they do have difficulties in certain areas, and I get that. And I guess my call is to make sure that that transition from grade level to grade level, from high school into higher ed, possibly, getting or employment, military, or CTE programs, technical programs, vocational programs. So that's what I see. I also do a lot of consultation with the tribes in the surrounding areas. And I do have acquaintances with higher education programs, some of the local agencies, such as the Division of Indian Affairs, the Urban Indian Center of Salt Lake, the Indian Training Center, and of course, the Native American Legislative Liaison Committee, which is the body of the legislatures here at the Capitol Hill. So, getting that opportunity to do that. And then the last is probably the most significant is my association with the community and with the parent committees in all these school sites. And we do have 21 Title VI American Indian education sites in Utah. So that's part of my educational background, and the other part is things that I've been around on the reservation. My father and my uncle were both Navajo code talkers. They served in the military. They were both Marines. They both of them never finished high school. They left high school to serve when they were 17 years old, and they returned when they were 21. So it gave him an opportunity to defend this country and to actually, if you read in some of the history, help win the war using the Navajo language. So, we didn't know any of this information until it was declassified, because at that time it was all highly classified information. But after 1969, got an opportunity to look into his background and to see what actually happened during the war and where he served and how they used the language. And today it's all history. And we had quite a few people in the community that serve as code talkers, and we didn't know that until after 1969. So those are kind of my background in terms of what um, where I was born and raised, where I came from. Now, the next slide is if we were to take a census across Indian territory, Indian land, Indian reservations, this is basically what you would see the population up on top and the one right across the reservations and the trust lands. But I think the most important that oftentimes that are asked is the American Indian tribes on the lower left. We have 574 federally recognized tribes, including 223 from the Alaskan Native groups. We do have 8 federally recognized tribes in Utah, and this is brought to you by the U.S. Census Bureau in 2000. So this information is good information. You know, we can probably each one of these areas we can drill down and we can start to talk about some of the information on these slides with this information. But I think the most important is that yeah, there's 574. Of course, there are tribes out there that are not recognized by the federal government, but they've been here for thousands of years. And with that piece of information, that that's another conversation for another day. Um, Now, this is the state of Utah. If we were to go up into space and we look down, and this is what we would see in Utah, and this is the shape of Utah, and all the American Indian tribes are found here on the left-hand side. And these red little marks here, these are reservations that you find all over Utah. And some of these little reservations are split, but they still have a large area of concern of their people. Um, and you find in the Four Corners area, you have Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And the Navajo Reservation is the largest Indian reservation in the United States. So these are places in which we find a lot of our students who are carrying on their traditions, their culture, their language. And of course, we get into the urban areas, and oftentimes that we find a lot of these students who have lost their language, and some of them they're trying to um, I guess, re-educate themselves to learn their language and learn a little bit about their culture. And we can drill down on this, because I see this quite a bit with a lot of these students. A lot of our children are going through that stage. That's one of I guess basically that's one of the issues that we have as educating our students in off the reservation places. So that's basically some of the background. Now the next slide is that now we're going to make some comparisons. This becomes very, very interesting because today we're going to explore some of the information of the cultural aspects. In this case, I have the American Indian versus the white, and the white culture. And we find that the comparisons here, even the names, the white as well as the American Indian, that becomes at times controversial. Let me take you through some of the controversial places with the namesake. Um, with American Indian, before 1492, we were classified and we called ourselves the people. So any name that you have across the nation with the names, they would say their name in their language, and you interpret that in English, that means the people. Um, Let me give you an example with the Navajo. We say our Navajo name for the Navajo is Dene, and you interpret that into English, that means the people. And if you take all the tribes all over the United States, you ask them what their names are in their language, and they'll express that. And you ask for the interpretation, it would come out as the people. But time goes on. After 1492, the term from the people changed to Indian. And a few years down the road, because of the society moving westward, and to I guess come into the land of the American Indian. Now we are classified as American Indians, and that has a lot to do with the association with the Constitution. Now, a few years down the road now. This was the early 70s and 60s and 70s. Now the term changed to Native Americans. So now we have the people, we have the Indian, we have American Indians now. We are called the Native American. And a lot of times the Native American, that term came from because a lot of the people from the reservation were going off to higher education programs, and they become a little bit more in their road of being educated, and they're returning with a little bit of with a say so of what their tribes should be and how the tribe should be associated with the federal government. And a few years down the road now, the name changed again. The First Nations, and oftentimes that you find the uh, the tribes up in the border of Canada. That's where that name changed, and that's where that name came from, was the First Nations. Now, a few years down the road, within the last 5, 10 years, now they refer to the American Indian as indigenous. You know, so we've gone through this name change. We see that our beliefs, our values, our traditions, our customs have been changing along the way. So we go from the people to Indian to the American Indian to the Native American, the First Nations, now indigenous. And if we had this private conversation, I do have a difficult time with indigenous. And I have my bias on that. Now, in this case, I use the term American Indian quite a bit because I think that it has a special relationship with the federal government through treaties and the sovereignty that they have on the reservations. And you go through the U.S. Constitution. In the U.S. Constitution, it mentions the American Indian three times. It doesn't say First Nations. It doesn't say Native Americans. It doesn't say Indian. It doesn't say Indigenous. It specifically says American Indians. That's where I get my rationale as to why I call myself American Indian. And I think I there are many that use this name becomes very, very flexible. Let me give you an example of that. I got four adult kids. Out of the four adult kids, three of my adult kids, they refer to themselves as Native Americans, and one of them refers to himself as American Indian. So, and I see across the board, even at USBE, the term is used in certain ways, and that's okay with that. But I think just justifying why that name that you use, that you can explain why. Then you would go to the other side is, the white also. They have name changes too. You have European and European American. And a few years down the road, you see Anglo, and and a lot of times that you have these applications, it has Caucasian. Now, I take the same rationale in terms of what term do I use uh, when I have the my association. And I use white because with my experience with the community, that's what I would see visually. And I think sometimes that you on the census, you have white and you have Caucasian. So in this case, I use that interchangeably, just as I do with American Indians. So it goes both ways. So that's where I have the two comparisons. Now we have the characteristics being exhibit. I'm going to make some examples of these on the American Indian side. Now, not all American Indians now or white exhibit these characteristics anymore. For me, because of my experience and some of the things that I have been associated with, I see a lot of them are right in the middle. They go both sides, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Like with extended families through clans and bands. In my clan, we take the maternal side. That's my mother's side. I'm Kia Ani. Kia Ani, which is the interpretation, the English is the Towering House Clan. And my dad was his Khanavani, which is the Corner Rock clan. And then my grandmother, on my mom's side is Tapa, and my grandfather on my father's side is Khanavani. See, these are clans that I belong to. So anytime that I do have association with other groups, and especially Navajos, those are the clans that I would express. And now the audience and the people that I'm associated with, they'll have that correlation that, yes, I'm from that clan, and that makes me a relative. It's not a blood relative now, it's a clan relative. So, on the reservation, you find that the Tarring House clan, my mother's clan, that's a big, very big, large clan that's in the Four Corners area. So when we get to the other side, is a lot of that information with extended families is through genealogy, and the genealogy that which is a way for me it was a way to track some of my family. I've used the genealogy practices also. And, I find that we go back to Narbonne, who was one of the nine chiefs that signed the treaty between the U.S. government and the Navajos way back in 1868, and from this genealogy that led me back into the clan that he belonged to, and he was I'm part of his clan. So that the extended families and the genealogy, that they have two camps, but along the way, you kind of jump both ways and both sides, and you use, for me, in my case, is I use both terms and I use both societies. And we get to the next is that everything belongs to others, which is a very, very interesting concept because I used to see this quite a bit in the classroom when I was a teacher where um, let me give you an example of that. Um, you get the learning style of the American Indian, and oftentimes you find that the American Indian, in a general sense, the majority would like to have tables because there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of conversation. It's a mutual understanding. And this is a reflection of their culture, the culture coming from the home, as opposed to being in ownership. And I feel that in the classroom, when you have tables, they have that conversation, they have that set in terms of everything belongs to others, as opposed to the traditional rows where everybody now has ownership of where their space is at. A few years ago when I was in the classroom, I noticed that well, I was a principal. I noticed this in a classroom where we had a teacher who was non-native. He had the students in a table setting, and one of the students came from his home. He brought the pencils, papers, and he put it in the middle of the table, and everybody took the paper, pencils, the crayons, and they took their share. The teacher noticed that. The teacher walks over to that table and he says, "No, you don't do that. You're stealing from the student." But the student, his growing up in his years around the culture, everything belongs to others. This was a sharing part as opposed to ownership. And for me that was a cultural conflict. There's a head-on collision with culture there. And I saw this in the classroom where now, where do we stand on all of this? Another one is just mainly, bringing that concept back to home where everything belongs to other versus ownership. I bought a home in Orem, Utah, and one of the first things I did was I put a fence around my house. And why did I do that? It, it's because of ownership. This little piece of property that I bought, now I own that. So when I own that, I'm going to put a fence around it that shows that there's ownership here, um, as opposed to everything belongs to others. So that one day, my dad and my mom came to visit me, and I was so proud that my wife and I, we bought a house, and first thing my dad says, "Hey, son, I'd like to talk to you about your home." And I knew already what he was going to say. He's coming from everything belongs to other as opposed to ownership. So there's, and a lot of times that you find the fences on the reservation, they're owned by sometimes private families, it's private land, and sometimes it's owned by the Bureau of Land Management. So, you do find fences on the reservation, and oftentimes that you have those people back and forth. So sometimes you find these students and these families are in the middle of the road. So these are just kind of social things that I see. And now we get into the more of into the classroom, the avoid the eye contact and direct eye contact. See, and for oftentimes that with American Indians, there's no they avoid the eye contact because you're the authority figure. And oftentimes that shows respect for the elderly. It shows respect for the person who's of age, maybe. And oftentimes that we see this in the classroom, you know, look at me when I'm talking to you, one of those. And the student becomes confused, like I saw one day in the hallway. A student was running down the hallway and he was caught when the door or when the bell rang. The teacher walks over to the student and the student put to avoid that contact of the eye of the teacher, and the teacher says that look at me when I'm talking to you. Now the student now is a little confused because he's bringing a cultural value to avoid contact because the respect he has for the teacher, he has respect for the authority, and he has respect for the position that teacher is holding, as opposed to looking me in the eye, where that for that student, that's not a kind gesture. But we get into the professional world. We go for interviews. We have presentations. We have meeting other people. A lot of times that cause for us to direct eye contact, and for some, they can break that, and for some, they carry that on, and oftentimes that you see the direct contact is for those individuals who have been, I guess, versed with the dominant society, as opposed to some of those students who are coming from the home, and that's all they know is to avoid the eye contact. So now we see a little bit of that in our classrooms, and the free time, the unconcerned with time, as opposed to structure and being aware of time. Because for the American Indian, they're more concerned about the journey. What's happening from point one, point A to point B, not knowing that there's time involved in this, and it's just enjoying the time and using the present time as their space in which they're going to live, as opposed to structuring. We have to be at this point at this certain time and be aware of time, and it's it the structured and aware of time. That's set with our in my case with employment. It's set with things that I have scheduled. Um, And my father being a Navajo code talker, he was very, very structured with time. And he would say that if you're 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. So, these are kind of a few things that a few things that have been expressed with the cultural value. Now, there's one point here. Let me go back, jump back just to eye contact and direct eye contact. This is really interesting. It just came into my mind. It was like my grandfather. My grandfather would say that if you look a person in the eye long enough, you look at a person long enough, you could see the heart, you know. And I've always had that practice, I see that, I think that for me, this is a culture value that I really, really like. And I try to uh, respect that. So it's something that I've always liked. Um, we get into things where this is again this becomes a classroom setting in a classroom. Questions, a question for cultural identification versus no question about cultural identification. We see this quite a bit with in the classroom, which is appropriate. Cultural appropriation is probably one of the biggest avenues, the biggest point in our classrooms. When I talk about cultural appropriation, I'm talking about is the materials, book, supplies, the setting. Is that appropriate for everyone? And sometimes specifically for the American Indian, because oftentimes during the season, we have these celebrations throughout the year, like Halloween, and we find that some of the students who are unaware, they portray and dress like an American Indian, you know, and I think that's inappropriate. I think there has to be a lesson taught here, you know. So I think that this question about cultural identification, that has to be expressed, that has to be, in some cases, research whether that's appropriate, as opposed to no question about cultural identification, and we just carry on as if though that the cultural value, the cultural beliefs, the cultural identity, traditions, that's not important. The important thing is that we're going to do this, and this is the way it's going to be done, you know. And I think this goes into some of the areas in the local schools, uh, school districts. I know of two school districts that changed the name from an American Indian to a name that is much more appropriate for the community and something that is not offensive. So we can probably drill down on that and have a conversation on that also. I think in a larger national um, conversation is like the Washington Redskins. There was no question about cultural identification. There was no consultation between the tribe and the local tribes. That name was given. That name was used, and now that name has changed. And I think you take a cross section of study in the survey, you find that almost 80% would say that was agreeable. And there are 20% that would say, no, we like the name Redskins, So, there's, I feel that it's, the educational part has to play a big part in this in terms of making a proper decision in terms of the, the cultural value for the American Indians. And the next is the area of the face-to-face consultation as opposed to a representative. And I used to see this quite a bit. I'm pretty sure that You, as a teacher, may see this down the road. You know, when we have consultations with the parents. In my case, I like to talk to the mom and the dad, and oftentimes I get an aunt or an uncle, or a relative. Um, and in the eyes of the American Indian, that represents their family structure. That represents their family uh, um, taking responsibility. Um, so, and at times we may see that as a representative. But again, this is a cultural thing that happens quite a bit. Um, and I think that being a principal at both the middle school and high school, I observe this quite a bit. I like to talk to the parents if that's possible, and oftentimes they do send a representative. We think it as a representative, like an aunt or uncle or a relative. And actually, it's a face-to-face consultation with a representative from the mom and the dad because of the family structure, you know. And I think that understanding this, it it relieves a lot of the pressures from everybody, you know. So, another thing is with the dance part of that of a high school. There's certain reasons why we have celebrations through um, expression, religious expression. Oftentimes, it's a result of some accomplishment. Let me give you an example of that. Uh, at the end of Toward the end of the year, they have large celebrations, and oftentimes with American Indian, they like to have this expression through a powwow. A powwow is where you get together and you celebrate. You celebrate the accomplishments, in this case, with seniors. And seniors have an opportunity to use and express their expression through a dance. And they put on their regalia, and they get out there and dance, and they all have a good time because again, the whole community is celebrating this moment of accomplishments. And I also saw this with the preschool. There was a preschool right close to where I was a principal at. Actually, it was the next building over. They used to have a lot of these students. They go through that expression. They used to have a mini powwow for these kids because that's an accomplishment where they're, I guess, basically going from one level to the next level. But in this case, I'm talking about with my expression is that the high school. So the high school on Friday night, everybody has a good time, and they're dressed in their regalia, they're dancing, and for an expression. Now on Saturday night, it's something different. Now they're dancing for pleasure, which is the prom. And I see the same students who are using their regalia on a Friday night. Now they have a three-piece suit and they're coming with a shirt and tie, and they're dressed really formally, and they're dancing for pleasure. So there are these students now. They're going from one to the other, so they're understanding the cultural value of their culture as well as the dominant culture. So now they're living in somewhere in between. And for some of these students, they do this bridge crossing, if you will, very good and very often and very well. Um, and I think one of the big things here that we also have around the community in our school is respect other religions as opposed to convert others to the religion. Um, and I have not seen uh, where an American Indian has a ceremony they'll always include other people, other races, other, nationalities. I have never seen them decline anybody. And I do a lot of my religious practices at home. I still practice my ways in which I was raised. I still celebrate the four seasons, the four directions. I still use all the traditions that were offered to me and given to me. And living in Orem, oftentimes I continue doing this. So these practices that I have with me, I shared that with my parent, well, with my parent, I share this with my children and my grandchildren now. And I used to see quite a bit of convert to other religions, which is, I guess, that's okay. Um, because I see that a lot of American Indian people now are, they're converted to other religions. And when they do return back to the reservation, oftentimes they start to practice the religion which they were raised with. Like in my case, I go back and forth, to satisfy, and yeah, it's quite interesting. One of the things that was really interesting too was that was my dad. Um, that one day, we moved to northern New Mexico, and we had, teacherage for all the teachers, and I was really excited to graduate from college. Now I'm going to be teaching, and I'm going to be teaching the Navajos here in the area, and I was really, really excited about it. And so I showed him around, showed him around town. It's a very, very small community, and in this small community, there were three churches sitting side by side, about maybe 40, 50 yards apart. And we drove right through and drove by the three churches, and he asked me to stop. So I stopped, and he says that, son, I was born. No, I was born. I was baptized in all three denominations. Kind of surprised me. I said, "Wow." I said, "Why did you do that?" He says, "One of those three must be right." So when I go back to that community, I'll always have a chuckle on my face when we go by there. So it's something that that expression has always been with me, and it's gonna carry me on for the next life, I guess. So now these are just some of the things, socially, the things I've observed in the classroom. And I think you as teachers, you may observe this with families. You may observe this with the community in which you guys are in. And I think for some, this might be new information. And the last is, the learning through books, and as opposed to learning through culture, because our American Indian history today, now, in the past, it used to be orally taught. All our history, it was orally given and passed on from generations to generations. Now they're putting that into books. They're putting that into research. They're putting that into literature and things that is tangible. Um, but before, learning from books, that's where we got our information. But today, I think that's changed. And some of the things that we've learned through culture is some of the information that we find with things that we see in the classroom. This is more of the high school level, but this might come down to the elementary school and maybe the primary grades. Let me start with the high school here. Oftentimes that we find that there's courses that we take specifically with biology and sciences. And one of the areas in which we have to pass through a grading system is that we have to dissect a frog. For the American Indians, specifically Navajos, that's taboo. that we don't do that. But now you ask yourself a question: is that what about those people who are pursuing health fields, health professions? They got to go through this process. There is a process here now. I think you can even find these dissecting of certain uh, animals and reptiles and so on and so forth through the internet. That really gives us an opportunity to, because this was an association with the years in which I was raised. Um, and being a principal, I saw a lot of this, and we use the internet, we use other sources in which they could see in what's once they dissect a frog, they could see the information that they're looking for, what's available, you know. So this is one of the areas, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of the other tribes, like this is only one example, for us that there are other certain animals that carry, we call them medicine, like in the case of things that fly, we call them medicine birds. We have medicine birds out there that we have great admiration to, and that those birds really help with our ceremonies. And there's certain birds that will bring a message to you. Not so much as bad luck, but it's a message. And we can talk about that on another day with this conversation. But I think just to be aware that there are certain animals and things that crawl and swim, things that are animals. Some of them, some of those animals, they bring a message, and sometimes when we have that message, it's not a very good message. It's bad luck message, as opposed to some other birds, they bring you good luck. So, those are just some of the things that. And I think if we had a long workshop, we could probably drill down on a lot of this information where it becomes common knowledge that because I think for those people who are teaching American Indian students, even at the very very primary level, knowing a little bit of this because their families may be coming from a traditional setting or a traditional value system. Now, all this information is information that I think that everybody is seeking, and one of the things is that these students and even society, we have cultural options. We accept, reject, become bicultural, or we reject both and we start our own. I did research on this information here, and that research information gives me a better look on what I could associate these terms to. I think accepting the culture that we're in, that becomes very adaptable. It's very difficult to reject the culture that you're in. You know, um, it's um, you know, I I used to see this, especially those teachers that are coming from the East or Midwest, and they come onto the reservation, and sometimes they like the setting, but they reject the culture. But the culture comes with the territory. You know, and in years, the years that I was there, the superintendent had an opportunity to set these programs up for those new teachers who are coming in, and they become bicultural. So that works out well. And I think down in San Juan School District, especially you get out into the remote areas of the reservation, like Monument Valley, Navajo Mountain. Those are very remote areas of the reservation that you find the cultural changes. And some of those teachers like those changes like that, and they become bicultural. So that's I think that's it, to experience this for me, it's always a good thing because in my time of living, I think I've adapted to both cultures and both cultures and both worlds. And now the next diagram is a diagram that oftentimes I uh, I show to students, and this kind of it just it moves me toward becoming uh, bilingual and bicultural and living in two worlds. You know, like these American Indian people here on top here, and then you find the presidents here, and these guys fit really well in your wallet. You know, and I took this diagram to Monument Valley High School. This was last semester. There were 26 in the classroom. There were 23 out of the 25 students. They got all the names correct. For me to conclude at the end of that day was that they have to be versed in both worlds. They have to be versed in both recognition of people, you know, and oftentimes I show this to those students who are preparing, college students who are preparing to go to the classroom. And some of the wants is that they want to get down into a reservation to teach. And then this is just very a simple, it's a simple picture. And when they see this, and they struggle with the four up here. And I think when if they're versed more into what they like to pursue, I think they know who those people are, and the four people here. So um, we're just about concluding my presentation this morning. There's another one here, with our chiefs. This is Chief Manlito. This is after he signed a treaty in 1868 with the Navajos and the federal government. And the first thing he said after signing that treaty was because there was a clause on that. And what the clause, one of the clause was it's the health and the educational arm and the sovereignty of their people. But he was addressing this to his young folks, and I think of what I see from his expression, his writing, is that he was a visionary. He visioned this thing. He says, my grandchildren, education is a ladder. Tell our people to take it, and that's one of the things he said. And so now with the Navajo tribe, they do have a scholarship set aside. It's called the Manlito Scholarship Award. Uh, it's a very prestigious award. I you know my children have gone through that, and I think that when my children were raised on the reservation, they saw a lot of this, a lot of the teachings, and now they're I got the two older ones, the boy and the girl, they're both attorneys. And I got the third one is a dental hygienist. And I got the fourth one who's he's a jack of all trades. He does a lot of odd jobs here and there. But I think that for me to explain to them that this is part of your people. This is our people. And very visionary people. Um, and the next one is a sitting bull. Let us put our minds together and see what we can do for our children. And here he was a visionary. He says our children. He didn't say American Indian children or the Sioux children or the Navajo children. It's our children. And And when I express or when I say our children, it's you as an educator. Those are our children. You know, these are our kids, and going through this whole process of education, I think that's a good thing for everybody. And this is one thing I really I enjoy. You know, this is the early part of the morning in Monument Valley. I was staying up in Gouldings and I came out of the hotel. You know, actually, it was my sliding door. I saw the sunset, or not sunset, sunrise. And, you know, my, my prayers were answered that day too, you know. So this is one of the things I really keep close to my heart because this is basically, it's it's a, I guess it's a site or a place in which the Creator put us, you know. So it's a great thing. Okay, the last word I'd like you guys to know is yeah, it means thank you. And if you guys have any questions, maybe I don't know how to answer some of your questions. If you unmute yourself and maybe we could have a little small conversation if we can. Okay, Jared, do we have
Yes, there's a question that was put in the chat. The question says, my daughter substitute teaches in the Hoopa Reservation in California, and I'm wondering how universal do these concepts apply to other American Indian tribes?
you know the cultural value of this? Oftentimes that you find that the cultural value is almost common among all tribes. You know, the eye contact, the table setting, the meeting of their clan groups in a group. You know, you we can take the Hoopa tribe, and I think they're just south of Sacramento, around Sacramento area. If you take those people and probably plant them in the Ute reservation, you know, they'll do very well because they have a commonality. The commonality is that the culture and the culture are very, very, very close. Because, you know, being Navajo, I go out to the Ute reservation and you know, after, you know, a couple of meetings with them, after a while they call me brother because it's the feeling and the conversation is almost the same.
Wonderful. That's interesting that there's that connection across tribes. Is it regional? Is it if you went to someplace on the East Coast to visit a tribe, would
You
there
know, that's a good question. You know, you go to the East Coast, a lot of it is it's mixed with Christianity. You know, they're losing a lot of their cultural values, beliefs, traditions on the East Coast, but you get more into the Southwest, like with the Goshu to Shoshone and you know the Paiutes. They still have that rich, really rich cultural value. And you know, I've been out the back east, and you know, I see that quite a bit. But they, you know, they're picking up a lot of their traditions from the past. So it I think they progress a lot because I've been out there, you know, like almost 20 years ago, and I went back last year, and it's you know, and I see that they've changed quite a bit.
interesting? Thank you. Um, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, and I don't see any in the chat. If there are any more, this is yeah, we're up on the end of the times designated for this session. If there are questions, there's probably a little bit of time. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and end this session.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foster. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and sharing the information with our educators here. We really appreciate you joining and sharing your wisdom with with the people at our conference. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.